Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, today I'm going to be giving you guys a list of my top 10 running backs for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, I'm stoked to give you all this list, and a big reason why I'm so excited about it is because, well, my rankings are vastly different than most at the running back position, and they are not consensus at all. So just know that my rankings are not cookie-cutter rankings, and they're going to be very different from the consensus when it comes to running backs. Now, I made a wide receiver rankings video about a week ago, and my rankings were very chalky. And when it comes to the wide receiver position, I agree with the consensus for the most part. But at the running back position, it's very different. So I want to let you guys know how I'm valuing these players going forward, because I think that the consensus ADP for a lot of these players is way off. So I wanted to give you all my rankings. So I'm going to start right here with the first player on my list, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Now, this is a guy who played all 17 games last season. I'm stoked that this guy actually stayed on the field. And look, he returned to his Christian McCaffrey self when he, came back and was at full strength. 107 targets out of the backfield, second in the NFL. 46 red zone touches, top 10 in the NFL. This dude had a 21.8% team target share at the running back position. This is obviously just an utterly ridiculous target share for a running back. There's no reason to think that the game plan will be any different this year. No matter who plays quarterback for San Francisco, they're going to be passing the ball to Christian McCaffrey a lot, and he's probably going to have a 20+% team target share again in the offense. Not to mention he has way higher touchdown upside now than he ever has because of playing in a far better offense than he's ever been in. So the sky's the limit for Christian McCaffrey. He's an easy first running back off the board. Next player on my list is going to be Bijan Robinson. Now, this is a guy who obviously has all the athletic intangibles. We know that this guy can run in between the tackles. He can break big runs. He can dominate, catching passes out of the backfield. This dude can dominate all phases of the game. As we know, he's playing on a team that has a pretty slept-on offensive line. I think the Falcons' offensive line is a lot better than people give them credit. So, this is, in my opinion, a top 12 or so offensive line in the NFL. So Bijan Robinson is actually going to have some run protection and some holes to run through. And we know that he's going to create a lot of yards after first contact as well. So considering the fact that it's an extremely talented running back, and he's running behind a very solid offensive line, and he's going to be the main focal point of the offense considering the draft capital that they spent on him. I love Bijan Robinson. Sky's the limit. If he was a running back one in fantasy this year, wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. Next player on my list is going to be Tony Pollard. Now, everyone laughed at me last season, guys, when I said to fade Ezekiel Elliott and draft Tony Pollard. And, I was like, okay, just wait. He's going to take over the backfield. That's exactly what happened. Guys, in weeks 7 through 16 last year, Tony Pollard was the number one running back in all of fantasy. This dude has been hyper efficient in his career. 5.2 yards per carry last season. He had 5.5 yards per carry in the 2021 season. This last year, 5.9 yards per touch, which was fifth in the NFL. He had an 8.8% breakaway run rate, which means 8.8% of the time that he's carrying the ball, he runs the ball for 15 yards or more. This is a crazy breakaway run rate. And he also had 9.5 yards per reception, which is second in the NFL. And he was very efficient as far as his yards per route run, top 4 in the league in his yards per route run with 1.82 yards per route run. This dude is hyper efficient. He's incredibly talented. Nobody gives him credit for being a back that can handle a 3-down carry workload, but this is an absolute fallacy. This dude can be a true 3-down back. He's got the skill set. He's big enough. He's not as big as most workhorse running backs, but he's built enough to handle a 3-down workload. And this dude is a true 3-down back. Don't let anyone tell you Tony Pollard is not a true 3-down back. Everybody says that for some reason, and they don't really have any good backing as to why. Tony Pollard is a true 3-down back. He's proved to be nothing but that in his early career in the NFL. This dude is absolutely awesome. He's going to be the workhorse for the team, and he's going to absolutely explode in the Cowboys offense. He is just right behind Bijan Robinson for me. Next player on my list is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. Now, this is a guy who's 5'11", 230 pounds, built like a brick house. This dude saw 89 targets out of the backfield last season. This was top 3 in the NFL and had 5.2 yards per touch. Very efficient as far as his yards per touch efficiency. This dude is an immense talent. This is another player that I said, fade the starting running back going into last season, fade Damian Harris, draft Ramondre Stevenson. He's going to take over the backfield. He did so very early in the season, and Damian Harris pretty much became irrelevant, and Ramondre totally took over the backfield. And even in games where they were both playing, Ramondre Stevenson was getting all the fantasy production. And then it just got to the point where, Damian Harris was in and out with injuries, and Ramondre just became the guy. They got rid of Damian Harris. Ramondre Stevenson is going to be the absolute workhorse back for this team. If he saw more targets out of the backfield this year than guys like Christian McCaffrey or Austin Ekeler, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised. This dude gets targeted like crazy out of the backfield. He's pretty much the new Alvin Kamara, so the sky's the limit for Ramondre Stevenson. I absolutely love this guy going into this season. Next player on my list is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor, I want to have him higher because, it's Jonathan Taylor. Like, if you looked up, workhorse running back in the dictionary, you might as well just have a picture of Jonathan Taylor. He's got the prototypical build at 5'10", 225. Runs a sub 4.4. The dude is an insane athletic specimen. And in his career, he's averaged 5.1 yards per carry, despite having that season last year where he was pretty much just a sitting duck because, he was one of the only weapons of the offense that could do anything. So teams were just stacking the box and, pressuring Matt Ryan and coming after Jonathan Taylor. And he was just kind of a sitting duck. With that being said, he's still averaging 5.1 yards per carry in his career. His yards per carry efficiency has been insane. We know that this team should be a little bit better coming into this season with a younger, fresher arm at quarterback. So I do like the upside for Jonathan Taylor. I think he could bounce back and be possibly a top 3 running back in all of fantasy. Next player on my list is going to be Saquon Barkley. Now, this is another guy I want to have higher because, it's Saquon Barkley. He's the ultimate athletic specimen at the running back position. He's got the size. He's got the speed. And last year, he saw a 17.2% target share out of the backfield, which was top 5 in the NFL. So this dude can dominate in both phases of the game, as we know. He can put up crazy yards per carry efficiency. He can take short pass plays to the house. This dude has touchdown upside because he could score from anywhere. And he had an 80% opportunity share in his backfield last year. This was top 3 in the NFL. If a running back has an 80+% opportunity share in his backfield, you want every bit of that. It means he's going to be getting a ton of volume. And pretty much the entire offense runs through Saquon. So I love Saquon Barkley this season. The only reason that I have him lower than consensus is because, one, he has a very tough schedule. If you look at all the running backs, Saquon Barkley probably has the toughest strength of schedule out of all of them. So I really don't like that. And then another red flag that I have with Saquon is, as good as he was overall last season, he really didn't display that high of a weekly ceiling, right? He didn't have that many games where he scored like over 22 PPR points. He might have only had like 3 of them, maybe 4, where he scored over 22 PPR points. Only 1 game where he scored over 30. I know those things are hard to do, but, when you're drafting a running back in the first round, you want a massively high ceiling. And Saquon was more like just steady and consistent last year as opposed to having that high weekly ceiling that guys like Tony Pollard have. So I had to have Saquon a little bit lower than guys like Tony Pollard and Bijan because I think that their ceilings on a weekly basis are just way higher. Next on my list is going to be Travis Etienne. Now, Travis Etienne, 1,125 rushing yards last year. A big problem with Travis Etienne last year was he only had a 7.8% team target share. And for a back that's supposed to command a ton of volume out of the backfield, that's kind of his reputation. He did not see nearly the target share we wanted him to see, but he did run 245 routes, which was top 15 in the NFL. And I've talked about this on my channel before. If a running back runs a lot of routes and they just happen to not see a very good target share, that's a fluke. It means that the following season, you could usually see a significant bump in target share. So look for Travis Etienne's target share to go up this coming season. He also had 45 red zone touches and only 5 touchdowns. So that's fluky as well. If you touch the ball 45 times in the red zone, you should definitely have more than 5 touchdowns. So considering how good this offense is going to be, I think that Travis Etienne is in for some massive positive touchdown regression. Last year, he only scored 5 touchdowns, right? If he didn't score double-digit touchdowns this year, I'd be surprised. I like Travis Etienne. There's a few red flags like the target share, but I think those things are going to go up and improve this season. Next player on my list is going to be Austin Ekeler. Now, I get it, guys. Austin Ekeler was the running back 1 in fantasy last season. The dude is absolutely awesome. He's been incredibly good for fantasy the past 2 years. And so, I know a lot of people want to have him higher in their rankings, okay? But the red flags with Austin Ekeler are certainly there. I mean, he's going to be 28.5 going into this season. We know that running backs typically fall off a cliff at age 27. So there's at least a slight red flag in regards to his age. Also, this dude never rushes the ball for more than 1,000 yards. I mean, he only had 900 rushing yards last season. He obviously dominated because of his dominance in the passing game, but the yards per carry efficiency, only 4.5 yards per carry, only 900 rushing yards. I just don't trust a running back to get less than 1,000 rushing yards in a season, which is probably certainly going to happen again this year, and be the running back 1, especially when you add all these targets to the offense. Austin Ekeler is dependent on target share and touchdowns, okay? His touchdowns are going to be siphoned away by all these receivers this year, Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. There's so many good receivers in this offense that they're going to siphon a ton of touchdowns from Austin Ekeler. He's going to have inevitable positive touchdown regression. There's no way in the world he scores 18 touchdowns again this year. I don't think he's even going to get remotely close. If he had a significant decrease in touchdowns this year, something like only single-digit touchdowns, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. He's probably going to have the worst negative negative touchdown regression in the entire NFL at any position. So I don't trust this. And also his PPR upside is going to be capped because if Keenan Allen stays healthy all season and Mike Williams and Quentin Johnston, this team is going to be airing the ball out to their wide receivers. Last year, all those guys were hurt, so the only person to pass the ball to was Austin Ekeler. That's not going to be the case this year. There's too much target share for competition for Austin Ekeler, so I think he's going to drop off significantly in fantasy, but I still have him just inside my top 10, being a top 10 back, but not doing nearly what he did last season or the past few seasons before that. So, next player on my list is going to be Nick Chubb. Now, Nick Chubb, 1,525 rushing yards last season. This is hilarious to me. This dude had 1,500 rushing yards. Austin Ekeler had 900, and Austin Ekeler finished way ahead of him in fantasy. How is that even possible? Well, it's all about the amount of targets that you receive out of the backfield. Nowadays, you have to catch passes out of the backfield to be a dominant PPR back. You just do. And Nick Chubb just doesn't catch enough passes out of the backfield. He only had a 40% route participation in his offense. The dude just really doesn't catch passes. He's probably the best pure runner in the entire league, running behind one of the best offensive lines in the entire league, but the dude does not catch enough passes. And, I don't trust running backs in PPR that don't catch passes these days. That being said, he's still very reliable because he's going to have tons of weeks where he runs the ball for 100 yards or more. So he presents an awesome floor and still a decent ceiling, but his mega high ceiling is capped, and he has nothing of a ceiling like guys like Christian McCaffrey or Ramondre Stevenson because they catch tons of passes out of the backfield. And those guys are just going to absolutely squash Nick Chubb in fantasy production. I can almost guarantee you. The dude just doesn't catch enough passes. Next player on my list is going to be Breece Hall. Now, this guy sneaks into my top 10, and obviously this guy is going to be one of the biggest gambles in fantasy this year. Probably the biggest gamble in fantasy, right? I mean, his upside is best player in all of fantasy, points leader at every single position outside of the quarterback position. That's Breece Hall's ceiling. But his floor is like out in week 2 and injures his knee and is out for the season, right? It's really hard to trust players coming back from ACL tears. That being said, there's tons of really good reports coming out saying that Breece Hall is, on track to be 100% to start the season. And I very much believe this because, he got hurt at pretty much like the midway point of the season. So he had all that rest time from then and the end of the year and then the beginning of the year until football season this year. So he'll have about 10 months of recovery from the time he had his injury by the time the season starts. And with that being said, it was a clean tear. It's not nearly as brutal as the tear that Javonte Williams had. So Breece Hall, this dude, I think is going to come back and actually be 100%. Now, this is a guy last year, 11.3% breakaway run rate. First in the NFL, 11.3% of the time. When he ran the ball for 15 yards or more. This is mind-blowing. 6.9 yards per touch, which was first in the NFL. This dude's absolutely electric. His big playability is second to none. If he stays healthy and on the field, he could certainly be the running back one in all of fantasy. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. But I have him much lower on my list than I normally would because we know from a long history of fantasy football that players coming back from an ACL tear usually involve a massive risk. So, all right, guys, those are my top 10 running backs for the season. Hope this video helped. Catch you later.